Rain hammered Brooklyn like the city itself was under siege. Kaylin Mercer stood soaking wet in the hallway of her own apartment, staring through the cracked open bedroom door at her boyfriend Ethan, tangled up with another woman. A woman wearing diamonds that cost more than Kaylin earned in a year. Ethan didn't even look sorry. He laughed. He mocked her cheap clothes and her pathetic little life. Then he grabbed her by the arm and threw her out into the freezing November storm with nothing but her purse. What Ethan didn't know, what nobody in that miserable Brooklyn walk-up could possibly know, was that Kaylin Mercer wasn't her real name, and the satellite phone hidden in her worn handbag connected directly to the most feared crime lord in New York City, her husband. If you want to see how far a betrayed queen will go for revenge, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Rain came down hard enough to sting, the kind of cold November rain that soaked through every layer you wore and made your bones ache. Kaylin Mercer stood beneath the broken awning outside Giuseppe's Corner Market with her arms wrapped tight around herself, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Water dripped from her hair down the back of her neck. Her gallery uniform, black slacks and a white button-down that the owner insisted looked professional, clung to her skin like wet paper. She was 26 years old and exhausted in a way that went deeper than just needing sleep. The subway ride from Manhattan had taken an hour and 15 minutes because of track work. Her feet throbbed inside cheap flats that were falling apart at the seams. Her phone battery was dead. She'd skipped lunch again because the sandwich shop near the gallery charged $12 for turkey on stale bread, and she couldn't afford that anymore. Not when rent was 3 weeks late, and Ethan kept saying his promotion was coming any day now. Ethan, her boyfriend of 14 months. The man who promised her stability. The man who worked in finance and wore expensive suits and told her she didn't need to worry so much about money because he had everything under control. She pulled her keys from her purse and pushed through the rain toward the apartment building at the end of Bedford Avenue. It was a converted warehouse with peeling paint and a front door that never locked properly. The landlord kept promising to fix it. Kaylin stopped believing him 6 months ago. The stairwell smelled like mildew and old cooking grease. She climbed 3 flights, her wet shoes squeaking against cracked linoleum. By the time she reached the door to apartment 3C, her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her keys. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. The lights were dimmed. Soft jazz played from the speaker Ethan kept on the bookshelf. A champagne bottle sat open on the kitchen counter. Dom Perignon, the label said. Kaylin recognized it from the gallery where she worked. One of the wealthy clients had bought a case once. It cost $400 per bottle. Ethan didn't drink champagne. He said it was overpriced garbage for people with more money than sense. Kaylin's heartbeat kicked up. She moved slowly into the apartment, her wet shoes leaving dark prints on the hardwood floor. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough for golden light to spill through. Voices drifted out. A woman's laugh. High and careless. The kind of laugh that came easy when you'd never worried about rent or groceries or whether your shoes would last another month. Ethan's voice followed. Lower. Amused. Kaylin's hand reached for the bedroom door before her brain caught up. She pushed it open, and the world tilted sideways. Ethan was in bed. Naked. Sheets tangled around his waist. His sandy hair was a mess. His face was flushed and smiling in a way Kaylin hadn't seen in months. The woman beside him was stunning. Blonde. Flawless skin. Emerald green eyes that sparkled even in the low light. She wore nothing but a silk robe that had slipped off one shoulder. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. Real diamonds. Not the cheap costume jewelry Kaylin sometimes wore to gallery events. Celeste Beaumont. Kaylin recognized her immediately. Everyone in New York knew the Beaumont family, real estate royalty, billionaires, the kind of people who owned entire city blocks and summered in the Hamptons. Celeste looked at Kaylin the way someone might look at a stray dog that wandered into a 5-star restaurant. Ethan didn't even blink. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair, and smiled. Not apologetic, not embarrassed, smug. "You're home early," he said. Kaylin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. The champagne, the diamonds, the woman in her bed, Ethan's expression, like this was funny. Her voice cracked. What is this? Celeste laughed softly and reached for the champagne flute on the nightstand. Oh God, Ethan, you didn't tell me she was coming back tonight. I thought she worked late on Thursdays, Ethan said casually, like they were discussing the weather. Kaylin took a step back. Her hands were shaking again. Harder this time. Are you serious right now? Ethan sighed and swung his legs out of bed. He grabbed his pants from the floor and pulled them on without any sense of urgency. Look, Kaylin, this isn't personal. Not personal? Her voice spiked. You're in bed with someone else and it's not personal? It's just the way things are. He fastened his belt and turned to face her fully. His eyes were cold now, flat. You and me? That was never going to last. Something sharp and hot twisted in Kaylin's chest. We've been together over a year. Yeah, and I've been bored for most of it. The words hit like a slap. Celeste laughed again, softer this time, like she was trying to be polite, but couldn't quite manage it. Kaylin's vision blurred at the edges. You told me you loved me. I told you what you needed to hear. Ethan crossed his arms. Come on, Kaylin. Be honest with yourself. Did you really think this was going somewhere? Look at you. She flinched. You work at a gallery that pays you poverty wages. You wear the same 3 outfits every week. You can't even afford to fix your phone screen. He gestured towards Celeste without looking away from Kaylin. This is my future. Someone who actually has something to offer. Celeste smiled and sipped her champagne. Kaylin felt herself shrinking, felt the weight of every cruel word pressing down on her shoulders. For a moment, just a moment, she was exactly what Ethan saw. Small, powerless, forgettable. Then the heat in her chest turned into something else. Rage. Cold and sharp and steady. Get out, Ethan said. Kaylin blinked. What? You heard me. He walked toward her, still shirtless, still smiling that terrible smile. Pack your stuff and get out, tonight. This is my apartment too. Your name's not on the lease. He stopped inches away from her, close enough that she could smell the champagne on his breath. And even if it was, you're 3 weeks behind on rent. So technically, you don't live here anymore. Kaylin's hands curled into fists. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. He reached past her and grabbed her purse from where she'd dropped it by the door. He shoved it into her chest hard enough to make her stumble backward. Now get the hell out before I call the cops and tell them you're trespassing. Celeste was laughing again, that high, careless sound that made Kaylin's skin crawl. Ethan grabbed Kaylin's arm, not gently, and dragged her toward the apartment door. Wait. No. He yanked the door open. Rain howled in from the hallway. You're done, Kaylin. Go back to whatever sad little life you crawled out of and stop wasting my time. He shoved her, hard. Kaylin stumbled out into the hallway, her shoulder slamming into the wall. Pain shot down her arm. Before she could catch her breath, Ethan slammed the door shut. The lock clicked, and then there was nothing but silence and the rain and the sound of her own breathing. Kaylin stood there for a long time, long enough that water pooled around her feet, long enough that her whole body went numb from the cold. Then she looked down at the purse still clutched in her hands. Her fingers moved on autopilot. She unzipped the inner lining, reached into the hidden compartment she'd sewn in herself almost 2 years ago, and pulled out a black satellite phone. It was small, expensive, military-grade encryption, the kind of phone that didn't exist on any civilian network. She hadn't touched it in 18 months. She turned it on. The screen glowed green in the darkness. No apps, no contacts, just a single button labeled with a number she knew by heart. Kaylin pressed it. The line connected immediately. 2 rings, then a voice, deep, calm, laced with an accent that still made her chest tighten even after all this time. Kaylin. She closed her eyes. Lucien. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just heavy with everything unsaid. Where are you? His voice was quieter now, controlled in the way it only got when he was angry. Brooklyn, she whispered. Bedford Avenue. Are you hurt? No. Are you lying? Her throat tightened. She looked down at the bruise already forming on her arm where Ethan had grabbed her. Not badly. Another silence. Then Lucien said very softly, I'm coming. The line went dead. Kaylin slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold floor with her knees pulled up to her chest. She stared at the phone in her hands and tried to remember how to breathe, because Kaylin Mercer didn't exist. Not really. That name, that life, had been a lie from the beginning, a cover, a way to disappear into the ordinary world and pretend she was someone else for a little while. Her real name was Kaylin Moretti, and Lucien Moretti was her husband. Wait. 9 minutes later, the street exploded with headlights. Kaylin heard them before she saw them. Engines, tires on wet pavement, the low rumble of vehicles moving in formation like a military convoy. She stood slowly and walked to the window at the end of the hallway. 3 black SUVs rolled down Bedford Avenue in perfect synchronization. Behind them came a midnight black Maybach with tinted windows and chrome trim that gleamed even in the rain. They stopped directly in front of the building. Doors opened. Men stepped out. 6 of them. Maybe 8. All wearing dark suits and earpieces. They moved with the kind of precision that came from years of training. 2 of them immediately blocked off both ends of the street. Another 2 positioned themselves at the building's entrance. Pedestrians scattered. A woman across the street grabbed her child and ran. Someone shouted something in Spanish and slammed their apartment window shut. The back door of the Maybach opened. Lucien Moretti stepped out into the rain. He was tall, lean, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His dark hair was slicked back. His face was all sharp angles and cold eyes, gray like winter steel. He looked up at the building, and even from 3 stories away, Kaylin felt the weight of his gaze. He said something to one of the men beside him. The man nodded and spoke into his earpiece. 30 seconds later, footsteps thundered up the stairwell. Kaylin turned just as 2 men in black suits appeared at the top of the stairs. They stopped when they saw her. One of them, older, scar running down his left cheek, nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Moretti." She didn't correct him. He gestured toward the stairs. "He's waiting." Kaylin descended slowly. Her legs felt unsteady. Her heart hammered against her ribs. By the time she reached the street, Lucien was already there. He stood in the rain without an umbrella, water streaming down his face and soaking into his suit. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes locked onto hers. Then he moved. Fast. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms without a word. One hand cupped the back of her head. The other wrapped around her waist, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his chest. "Don't." His voice was rough, strained. "Don't apologize." He pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes scanned her face, her hair, her soaked clothes. Then he saw the bruise on her arm. His entire expression changed. The cold steel in his eyes turned molten. "Who?" he said quietly. Kaylin swallowed hard. "Lucien? Who touched you?" She'd forgotten what his voice sounded like when he was truly angry. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of voice that made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit. "My boyfriend," she said. The word tasted bitter. "Ex-boyfriend. Ethan Cole. Where is he?" She pointed up at the building. 3rd floor, apartment 3C. Lucien turned to the scarred man. "Dante." Dante stepped forward immediately. "Bring him to me." "Alive?" Dante asked. For now, Dante nodded and disappeared into the building with 2 other men. Lucien turned back to Kaylin. He shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy and warm and smelled like cedar and expensive cologne. "There was a woman with him," Kaylin said quietly. "Celeste Beaumont." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Arthur Beaumont's daughter." "You know him?" "Everyone knows him." Lucien's hand moved to her chin, tilting her face up so she had to meet his eyes. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" "No." "Don't lie to me, Kaylin." "I'm not." She pulled the jacket tighter around herself. He threw me out, that's all." Lucien's thumb brushed against her cheek. For a moment his expression softened. Just a fraction. Just enough for her to see the man underneath the monster. "You should have called sooner," he said. "I thought I could handle it." "You shouldn't have had to." Before she could respond, shouting erupted from inside the building. Ethan's voice, high and panicked. Get your hands off me! I'll call the cops! The shouts cut off abruptly. 30 seconds later, Dante emerged from the building, dragging Ethan by the back of his shirt. Ethan's feet barely touched the ground. His face was pale. His eyes were wide with terror. Dante threw him onto the wet pavement in front of Lucian. Ethan scrambled backward on his hands and knees, soaked and shaking. What the hell is this? Who are you people? Lucian stared down at him without expression. Ethan's eyes darted to Kaylin. Kaylin, what? Then he saw the way she was standing beside Lucian, saw the jacket draped over her shoulders, saw the men in suits surrounding them like a wall of muscle and violence. His face went white. Oh God, he whispered. Lucian crouched down slowly until he was eye level with Ethan. You put your hands on my wife. Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning on dry land. Your wife? Her name, Lucian said quietly, is Kaylin Moretti. The color drained completely from Ethan's face. Everyone in New York knew that name. Lucien Moretti, the head of the Moretti crime family, the man who controlled half the city's underground economy. The man politicians whispered about in back rooms and federal agents built entire careers trying to take down. Ethan looked at Kaylin like he was seeing her for the first time. She stared back at him with cold, dead eyes. I didn't know, Ethan stammered. I swear to God, I didn't. You threw her into the street, Lucian interrupted. His voice was still quiet, still calm. Somehow, that made it worse. You humiliated her. You touched her. It was a mistake. Yes, Lucian stood. It was. He turned to Dante. Take him. No! Ethan lunged forward. Two men grabbed him before he could get within 5 feet of Lucian. Please! I didn't mean... Lucian ignored him completely. He put a hand on Kaylin's lower back and guided her toward the Maybach. Ethan's screams followed them all the way to the car. Please, Kaylin, tell him it was a misunderstanding. Kaylin. She didn't look back. Lucien opened the car door himself and waited until she was seated before closing it gently. Then he walked around to the other side and slid in beside her. The door shut. The world went silent. Kaylin sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead at the privacy divider between the back seat and the driver. Her hands were folded in her lap. She could still hear Ethan screaming outside, muffled now by bulletproof glass. Lucian said nothing. The car started moving. They drove in silence through Brooklyn. Rain drummed against the roof. The city blurred past the tinted windows. Streetlights and neon signs and people huddled under awnings. Kaylin's voice came out flat, hollow. What are you going to do to him? What would you like me to do? She turned to look at him. Don't put this on me. You're my wife. His eyes met hers. This is your decision as much as mine. I haven't been your wife in 18 months. You've been my wife every day since you said yes in front of that judge. His hand moved to hers, covering her cold fingers with his warm ones. Even when you ran, even when you tried to pretend you were someone else. Kaylin looked away. I needed to get out. I know. I couldn't breathe in that world. I couldn't. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard and forced herself to continue. I just wanted to be normal for a little while. Is that so terrible? No. Then why does it feel like I failed? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very softly, because you can't outrun what you are. The words hit harder than any of Ethan's insults. Kaylin closed her eyes and let her head fall back against the leather seat. I really thought I could. I know. I thought if I got far enough away, if I stayed quiet and small and invisible, maybe I could just disappear. And now? She opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him. At the sharp lines of his face and the gray eyes that never wavered and the hands that had killed more people than she could count. Now I remember why I married you, she said quietly. Something flickered across Lucian's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. His thumb brushed against her knuckles. Welcome home, Kaylin. The Maybach turned onto the FDR drive, heading toward Manhattan, toward the life she'd tried so hard to leave behind. Kaylin stared out at the glittering skyline and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. An anger she was starting to remember was so much more useful than fear. The Moretti estate sat on 12 acres of land in the Bronx, hidden behind stone walls 20 feet high and iron gates that required 3 separate security clearances to open. Kaylin watched through the rain-streaked window as the Maybach glided past armed guards and surveillance cameras, disguised as decorative lampposts. She'd forgotten how much she hated this place. Not because it was ugly. The mansion itself was beautiful in a cold, austere way. All marble columns and floor-to-ceiling windows and manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a lifetime. But beauty didn't make it feel less like a prison. The car stopped beneath a covered portico. Lucien stepped out first and extended a hand to help her. His palm was warm and dry against her cold, damp fingers. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Do what?" "Pretend I'm still part of this world. You are part of this world." His grip tightened slightly. "You always have been." Before she could argue, the front door opened and a woman appeared at the top of the steps. She was in her 50s, dressed in an impeccable black suit with her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her name was Teresa Volkov, and she'd been running the Moretti household for longer than Kaylin had been alive. Teresa's expression didn't change when she saw Kaylin, but something flickered in her dark eyes. Disapproval, maybe, or vindication. "Mrs. Moretti," Teresa said with a slight nod, "your rooms have been prepared." "Your rooms, not the guest suite, not a place to sleep. Your rooms," like Kaylin had never left. Lucien's hand moved to the small of her back, guiding her up the steps. "She'll need clothes," he said to Teresa. "Everything. Have it delivered by morning." Teresa inclined her head. "Of course." Inside, the mansion was exactly as Kaylin remembered. Polished marble floors that echoed with every footstep. Crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic light across expensive artwork. The faint smell of lemon polish and old money. A man appeared from one of the side hallways, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. Marco Russo. Lucien's head of security and closest friend since childhood. Marco stopped when he saw Kaylin. His expression went carefully neutral. "Boss," he said to Lucien. Then, after a beat, "Mrs. Moretti." Kaylin didn't respond. Lucien's hand pressed slightly against her back, urging her forward. "Dante called ahead?" "Yeah." Marco's eyes flicked to Kaylin, then back to Lucien. "We've got the boyfriend in the basement. The girl's been sent home with a warning." "What kind of warning?" "The kind that makes people remember why they shouldn't fuck with our family." Lucien nodded slowly. "Good. I'll deal with Cole in the morning." "You want me to prep him first?" "No." Lucien's voice went flat. "Leave him alone tonight. Let him think about what's coming." Marco's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's cruel, boss." "Yes," Lucien said. "It is." He steered Kaylin toward the grand staircase without another word. She climbed mechanically, her wet shoes leaving dark prints on the cream-colored runner. Her body felt heavy, disconnected, like she was watching herself from somewhere far away. They reached the second floor and turned down a long hallway lined with oil paintings of dead Moretti ancestors. At the end of the hall was a set of double doors carved from dark wood. Lucien pushed them open. The bedroom was massive, king-sized bed with silk sheets, fireplace already crackling with flames, sitting area with leather chairs and a view of the gardens. Everything pristine and untouched, like a museum exhibit, like Kaylin had never left. She walked to the center of the room and stopped, staring at nothing. Lucien closed the doors behind them. "You should get out of those wet clothes. I don't have anything else to wear. There's a robe in this bathroom. Teresa will bring clothes in the morning." Kaylin didn't move. Lucien crossed the room slowly and stood in front of her. His hands came up to frame her face, tilting her chin so she had to look at him. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "About what?" "About why you're shutting down." She pulled away from his touch. "I'm not shutting down." "You are." He let his hands drop but didn't step back. "You've barely said 10 words since we left Brooklyn." "What do you want me to say, Lucien?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "Thank you for rescuing me? Thank you for reminding me that I can't survive without you?" That's not what this is. Isn't it? She turned to face him fully. I spent 18 months trying to prove I could make it on my own, trying to be someone other than Kaylin Moretti, the mob wife who married into power because she had nowhere else to go. And the second things got hard. I ran straight back to you. You called me, Lucian said evenly, because a man put his hands on you and threw you into the street. That's not weakness. That's survival. It feels like weakness. Then your feelings are wrong, Kaylin laughed bitterly. You don't get to tell me how to feel. I'm not. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes had gone dark and dangerous. I'm telling you that you're being too hard on yourself, and you're being too easy on me. That's not possible. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Kaylin didn't want to unpack. She turned away and walked to the window. Rain streaked down the glass in diagonal lines. Beyond the gardens, she could see the stone wall and the city lights glowing in the distance. Why didn't you come looking for me? She asked quietly. Silence. Then Lucien's voice, low and rough. You asked me not to. Kaylin closed her eyes. I didn't think you'd actually listen. You told me you needed space. You told me if I loved you, I'd let you go. His footsteps moved closer. So I did. For 18 months. For 18 months, he agreed, and every single day felt like dying. Her breath caught. Lucien stopped directly behind her. She could feel the heat of him through her wet clothes, could smell cedar and rain and something darker underneath. I wanted to find you, he said quietly. I wanted to drag you back here and lock every door until you remembered who you belonged to. But that's not love. That's possession, and you deserved better than that. Kaylin's throat tightened. So you just waited? I had you followed. His voice was matter-of-fact. Every day, every hour. I knew where you lived, where you worked, who you spent time with. I knew about Ethan Cole 3 days after you met him. She spun around. You what? Did you really think I'd let you disappear completely? His expression was unreadable. You're my wife, Kaylin. I don't stop protecting you just because you're angry at me. She didn't know if she was furious or relieved. That's insane. That's love. No. She shook her head. Love is trusting someone enough to let them make their own choices. I did let you make your own choices. His hand came up to cup her face again, thumb brushing against her cheekbone. I let you walk away. I let you live your little fantasy in Brooklyn. I let you pretend you were someone else. But I never stopped watching, and the second you called, I came. Kaylin wanted to pull away, wanted to scream at him for being controlling and obsessive and everything she'd tried to escape. But she didn't, because deep down, underneath the anger and the shame and the exhaustion, there was a tiny, treacherous part of her that felt safe for the first time in 18 months. I hate you sometimes, she whispered. I know. You don't get to make decisions for me. I'm not. His other hand settled on her waist. But I'm not going to apologize for keeping you alive either. Before she could respond, someone knocked on the door. Lucian's expression shifted immediately, from the man who touched her face gently to the crime lord who ruled half of New York. Come in. The door opened. Marco stepped inside, his face carefully blank. Boss, we've got a problem. What kind of problem? Arthur Beaumont is on the phone. He wants to talk. Lucian's jaw tightened. About what? His daughter. Marco's eyes flicked to Kaylin. Apparently she came home hysterical. Told him some very interesting things about who she'd been sleeping with. Kaylin's stomach dropped. Lucian was silent for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, Put him through to my office. I'll be down in 5 minutes. Marco nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Kaylin stared at Lucian. He knows. He knows his daughter was involved with Ethan Cole. He doesn't know the rest yet. He will. Probably. Lucian straightened his cuffs, his expression going cold and calculated. Which means we need to control the narrative before he does. What does that mean? He looked at her. It means you stay here. Lock the door. Don't answer if anyone knocks unless it's me or Marco. Lucien, this isn't negotiable, Kaylin. His voice was hard now. Absolute. Arthur Beaumont is dangerous. Not in the way I am. He's legitimate, which makes him worse. He's got connections to judges, prosecutors, federal agents. If he decides you're a threat to his daughter's reputation, he'll bury you. I didn't do anything. You called me. Lucien's hand moved to her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You brought the full weight of the Moretti family down on his little princess and her nobody boyfriend. That's more than enough. Kaylin's pulse kicked up. What are you going to do? What I always do. He released her and walked toward the door. Protect what's mine. He left without looking back. Kaylin stood alone in the massive bedroom, staring at the closed door, and tried to remember how to breathe. Lucian's office was on the first floor, tucked into a corner of the mansion with windows overlooking the gardens. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes nobody ever read. His desk was mahogany, imported from Italy, heavy enough to stop a bullet. Marco was already waiting when Lucien walked in. He'd pulled up the security feeds on the monitors mounted to the wall, camera angles covering every inch of the estate's perimeter. He's pissed, Marco said without preamble. I don't care. Lucien poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey from the decanter on his desk and downed it in one swallow. Put him through. Marco tapped a button on the desk phone. The line clicked. Moretti? Arthur Beaumont's voice was clipped and cold. East Coast money. Ivy League education. The kind of accent that came from never having to raise your voice to get what you wanted. Lucien sat down in his chair and leaned back. Arthur, it's been a while. Not long enough. A pause. We need to talk about what happened tonight. I'm listening. Your people assaulted my daughter. Lucien's expression didn't change. That's not what happened. She came home in tears, Moretti. Said your men surrounded her apartment, threatened her, and told her to stay away from Ethan Cole. That sounds like assault to me. Your daughter, Lucien said evenly, was fucking a man who belongs to me. Silence. Then Arthur's voice, lower and more dangerous. Excuse me? Ethan Cole is currently a guest in my home. He's going to stay that way until I decide what to do with him. If your daughter wants to visit, she's welcome to come plead his case. Otherwise, she should stay out of this. You arrogant son of a... Careful, Arthur. Lucien's voice dropped into something cold and lethal. I've been very patient with your family over the years. I've looked the other way when your construction projects cut corners and violated union contracts. I've ignored the fact that half your buildings are structurally unsound because you pay off inspectors instead of hiring competent engineers. But my patience has limits. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the situation. Lucien poured himself another whiskey. Ethan Cole put his hands on someone I care about. He humiliated her. He threw her into the street like garbage. That's not something I forgive. What does any of this have to do with Celeste? Your daughter was in bed with him when it happened. More silence. Lucien could almost hear the gears turning in Arthur's head. Calculating. Weighing options. Trying to figure out who Ethan had hurt that would make Lucien Moretti personally intervene. Who? Arthur asked finally. That's not your concern. If my daughter is involved, it is my concern. Then tell your daughter to choose her lovers more carefully. Lucien set his glass down. Ethan Cole is finished. His career is over. His reputation is destroyed, and in a few days, he's going to disappear completely. If Celeste has any sense, she'll distance herself from him as quickly as possible. You can't just make people disappear, Moretti. This isn't the old days. Can't I? Lucien smiled even though Arthur couldn't see it. We both know I can. The only question is whether you're going to make this personal. Arthur was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. What do you want? I want your construction sites back online by Monday morning. What? You heard me. Lucien stood and walked to the window. Rain still poured down outside, turning the gardens into something dark and waterlogged. You've got 23 active projects across Manhattan. All of them are shut down right now because of union strikes that I initiated. I want them reopened, full crews, full schedules, and I want you to forget this conversation ever happened. That's extortion. That's business. Lucien turned away from the window. You can call it whatever you want, but those are my terms. Another long silence, then Arthur said very quietly, Fine. The sites reopen Monday. Good. But Moretti? Arthur's voice went hard. If I find out you've hurt my daughter, I won't. Lucien's tone was absolute. She's not my target. She never was. But if she keeps pushing this, if she goes to the press or the police or anyone else, that changes. Understand? Understood. The line went dead. Lucien set the phone down and exhaled slowly. His hands were steady, but his jaw ached from how hard he'd been clenching it. Marco was watching him carefully. That went better than expected. He'll come after me eventually, Lucien said. Men like Arthur Beaumont don't forgive slights. They just wait for the right moment to retaliate. So what's the play? Lucien walked back to his desk and sat down. We move fast. Dismantle Ethan Cole completely before Beaumont has time to think too hard about who we're protecting. Already on it, Marco pulled out his phone and started scrolling through messages. I've got people inside Cole's firm. They're ready to leak the embezzlement evidence to the feds as soon as you give the word. Do it. Marco typed something quickly. Done. The case files will hit the FBI's fraud division by morning. What about his personal accounts? Frozen. Credit cards maxed out and reported stolen. Lease on his apartment terminated effective immediately. Marco looked up. By Monday, he'll be completely broke. Good. Lucien leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. What about Celeste? She's a problem. Marco pocketed his phone. Rich girl with a victim complex and daddy's lawyers on speed dial. If she decides to play the innocent bystander, she could cause trouble. Then make sure she doesn't. Marco raised an eyebrow. How far do you want me to go? Not far. Just remind her that her reputation is fragile. A few well-placed rumors about her sleeping with a criminal, some photos showing up on gossip sites, nothing permanent, just enough to make her think twice about talking. You want me to threaten a billionaire's daughter with tabloid exposure. I want you to give her a reason to keep her mouth shut. Lucien's voice was calm, flat. She's not the target, Marco, but she's collateral. And if she gets in the way, she'll get hurt. Marco nodded slowly. I'll handle it. Quietly. Always. After Marco left, Lucien sat alone in his office for a long time. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. He thought about Kaylin upstairs, about the way she'd looked at him, angry and scared and something else he couldn't quite name. She'd called him possessive, controlling, and she wasn't wrong. But possession was just another word for protection, and control was just another word for keeping her alive. He'd let her run once. Let her play house with a nobody in Brooklyn. Let her pretend she could be normal. And look where it had gotten her, thrown into the street, bruised, humiliated. Never again. Lucien poured himself one more whiskey and drank it slowly, staring at the rain-soaked gardens and thinking about all the ways he was going to destroy Ethan Cole. Upstairs, Kaylin sat on the edge of the massive bed, wearing a silk robe that Teresa had left on the bathroom counter. Her wet clothes were in a pile on the floor. Her hair hung in damp tangles around her shoulders. She couldn't stop shaking. Not from cold, from adrenaline, from the realization that she'd just upended her entire life in the span of 3 hours. This morning, she'd been Kaylin Mercer, gallery assistant, struggling artist, nobody important. Tonight, she was Kaylin Moretti again, mob wife, queen of a criminal empire, someone people feared. She didn't know which version she hated more. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "It's me," Lucien's voice called from the hallway. Kaylin stood and crossed to the door. She unlocked it and stepped back. Lucien entered, still wearing his suit but with his tie loosened and the top button of his shirt undone. He looked tired, the kind of tired that went bone deep. Beaumont agreed to back off, he said without preamble. The construction sites reopen Monday. Celeste won't be a problem. Kaylin nodded numbly. Okay. I've got people moving on Ethan Cole's financials. By Monday morning, he'll have nothing. Okay? Lucien studied her face. You're not okay. I don't know what I am. He crossed the room and sat down on the edge of the bed, leaving space between them. You can still leave if you want. I won't stop you. Kaylin stared at him. Are you serious? Yes. After everything you just did? After calling in favors and threatening billionaires and destroying a man's entire life? Her voice rose. Now you're telling me I can leave? I'm telling you that you always have a choice. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. I'll protect you either way, but I won't keep you here against your will. That's insane. That's the truth. Kaylin wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to shake him until he stopped being so goddamn reasonable about everything. Instead, she sat down beside him on the bed. What happens to Ethan? She asked quietly. What do you want to happen to him? Stop asking me that. It's your decision, Kaylin. He hurt you. You get to decide how he pays for it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said very softly, I want him to understand what he did. He will. I want him to lose everything. I want him to know what it feels like to be small and powerless and scared. He will, Lucien repeated. And then I want him gone. She looked at Lucien. Not dead, just gone. Somewhere he can never hurt anyone else. Lucien nodded slowly. I can make that happen. How? Does it matter? Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have business interests in Alaska. Commercial fishing operations. Brutal work. Dangerous. The kind of thing that breaks men who aren't strong enough to handle it. Kaylin's breath caught. You're going to send him to Alaska, if that's what you want. For how long? As long as it takes to repay what he owes. And what does he owe? Lucien's hand moved to hers, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. Everything. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and absolute. Kaylin looked down at their joined hands. His fingers were longer than hers, stronger, scarred in places from fights she'd never asked about. I should hate you, she whispered. You probably should. I should be terrified. You probably should be that too. But I'm not. She looked up at him. And I don't know what that says about me. Lucien's expression softened just slightly. It says you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Before she could respond, her stomach growled loudly. They both froze. Then Lucien laughed. A real laugh, low and rough and unexpected. When was the last time you ate? He asked. Kaylin thought about it. Yesterday? Maybe. Jesus, Kaylin. He stood and walked to the door. Come on. Where are we going? Kitchen. You need food. She followed him down the hallway, through the silent mansion, to a massive kitchen that looked like it belonged in a five-star restaurant. Stainless steel appliances, marble countertops, a refrigerator the size of a small car. Lucien opened the fridge and started pulling out containers. Cold pasta, roasted chicken, fresh bread. He set everything on the counter and gestured for her to sit at the island. I can cook for myself, Kaylin said. I know. He pulled out a cutting board and a knife. But you're exhausted and you're shaking, and I'm not letting you near sharp objects right now. She wanted to argue, but she was exhausted, and she was shaking. So she sat down and watched him work. It was strange seeing Lucien Moretti in a kitchen, the man who ordered executions over breakfast, the man who controlled half of New York's criminal economy, the man who just threatened a billionaire without raising his voice. He moved efficiently, slicing bread and heating pasta and plating everything like he'd done this 1,000 times before. You're staring, he said without looking up. You're cooking. People need to eat. Most mob bosses have staff for that. I sent the staff home. He set a plate in front of her. Didn't want an audience. Kaylin looked down at the food. Her stomach twisted with hunger and nausea in equal measure. She picked up a fork and took a small bite of pasta. It was good. Really good. Where did you learn to cook? She asked. My mother. Lucien poured her a glass of water. Before she died. Kaylin had known his mother was dead. She'd just never asked how. I'm sorry, she said quietly. It was a long time ago. They ate in silence for a while. Kaylin managed to get through half the plate before her stomach protested. Lucien finished his food and started cleaning up, rinsing dishes and putting leftovers away. You don't have to do that, Kaylin said. I know. Lucien, stop. He turned to face her, his hands braced against the counter. Stop acting like you're a burden. Stop apologizing for existing. Stop pretending you don't belong here. I don't. You do. His voice was firm but not harsh. You've always belonged here. You just spent 18 months trying to convince yourself otherwise. Kaylin looked away. Maybe I was right to leave. Maybe. He crossed the kitchen and stopped in front of her. Or maybe you just needed to see what the alternative looked like. And what does it look like? Ethan Cole. Lucian's jaw tightened. Men who see you as disposable. Men who use you and throw you away the second something better comes along. You're not exactly a saint, Lucy. No. His hand came up to cup her face. But I'm yours, and that's the difference. Kaylin's breath caught in her throat. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Marco appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Boss, we've got movement. Lucienne's entire demeanor changed. Where? Ethan Cole's apartment. Looks like Celeste Beaumont went back. Lucienne's hand dropped from Kaylin's face. When? 20 minutes ago. Our guys have been watching. She's inside now. Doing what? Don't know yet. You want me to pull her out? Lucienne was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant and calculating. Then he said very quietly, No. Let her stay. But I want eyes on every conversation, every phone call, every text message. Marco nodded. Already on it. After he left, Kaylin stared at Lucien. What are you thinking? That Celeste Beaumont is smarter than I gave her credit for. Why? Because she went back. He turned to face her fully, which means she's either trying to help Ethan escape or she's gathering evidence to use against us. Kaylin's stomach dropped. What do we do? We wait. Lucienne's expression was cold, controlled, and we see what she does next. But Kaylin could see the tension in his shoulders, could hear the edge in his voice. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere across the city, in a Brooklyn apartment that no longer belonged to Ethan Cole, Celeste Beaumont was making decisions that would change everything. The surveillance footage came through at 3 a.m. Kaylin was half asleep in the massive bed when Lucienne's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He'd been lying beside her fully clothed, one arm draped across her waist, his breathing slow and even in a way that made her think he wasn't really sleeping either. The phone buzzed again. Lucienne's eyes opened immediately. No grogginess, no hesitation. He reached for the phone and read the screen, his expression shifting from neutral to something darker in less than a second. What is it? Kaylin asked. He didn't answer, just sat up and started typing rapidly. Kaylin pushed herself upright, the silk robe sliding off one shoulder. Lucienne. Get dressed, he said quietly. Why? Because we need to go downstairs, now. There was something in his voice that made her stomach drop. She slid out of bed and grabbed the clothes Teresa had left folded on the dresser earlier. Black jeans, a cashmere sweater, leather boots. She dressed quickly while Lucien made a phone call in clipped, rapid Italian. When he hung up, his face was carved from stone. What happened? Kaylin demanded. Celeste Beaumont just made a very stupid mistake. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. And we need to see exactly how stupid before the sun comes up. They descended the grand staircase and turned down a hallway Kaylin had never been allowed to enter when she lived here before. It led to a reinforced steel door that required both a keycard and a thumbprint to open. Lucien pressed his thumb to the scanner and the lock clicked. Beyond was a staircase leading down into darkness. Where are we going? Kaylin's voice echoed off concrete walls. The operations room. They reached the bottom and another door. This one opened into a space that looked like something out of a spy movie. Banks of computer monitors covering 3 walls, satellite feeds streaming in real time, and a conference table in the center surrounded by leather chairs. Marco was already there, along with 2 other men Kaylin didn't recognize. They all looked up when Lucienne entered, their expressions grim. Show me, Lucienne said. Marco tapped a keyboard and one of the large monitors flickered to life. Security camera footage, black and white. Timestamp 2:47 a.m. The angle showed Ethan's Brooklyn apartment from across the street. Kaylin recognized the building immediately. The crumbling brick facade, the broken awning, the door that never locked properly. On screen, a figure emerged from the building. Celeste Beaumont. She was wearing designer clothes that looked out of place on Bedford Avenue, a long camel coat and stiletto heels that clicked against the wet pavement. She glanced around nervously, then pulled out her phone. Marco fast-forwarded. 30 seconds later, a black sedan pulled up. Celeste climbed into the back seat. The car drove away. Where did she go? Lucian's voice was dangerously calm. Manhattan, Upper East Side. Marco pulled up another screen showing GPS tracking data. The car stopped outside the Beaumont estate for 20 minutes, then headed downtown. Downtown where? Marco's jaw tightened. Federal Plaza. The room went silent. Kaylin's blood turned to ice. She went to the FBI? Not exactly. Marco switched to a different feed. This one showed the exterior of a building Kaylin recognized from news reports. The FBI's New York field office. She met with someone in the parking garage. We couldn't get audio, but we got photos. He pulled up a series of images. Celeste standing next to a nondescript sedan, a man in a dark suit stepping out. They were too far away to make out faces clearly, but the body language was obvious. Celeste handing something to the man. An envelope, maybe. Or a flash drive. The man taking it. Celeste getting back in her car and driving away. Who is he? Lucian's hands were braced against the conference table, his knuckles white. We're running facial recognition now. Marco typed rapidly. But based on the license plate and vehicle registration, he's FBI, Financial Crimes Division. Kaylin felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She's cooperating with them. She's trying to. Lucian straightened and started pacing, his mind clearly working through scenarios at lightning speed. What did she give him? We don't know yet, Marco said. But she was in Cole's apartment for 40 minutes before she left. My guess? She grabbed evidence. What kind of evidence? Financial records, maybe. Emails, text messages. Marco pulled up another screen showing a timeline of Celeste's movements. Cole's an idiot, but he's been working in finance for 6 years. He's got to have documentation of some shady deals. If she handed that over to the feds, then they'll start digging, Lucian finished. His voice was flat, cold. And if they dig deep enough, they'll find connections to us. Kaylin's hands started shaking. How is that possible? You said Ethan was nobody. You said he didn't know who I was. He didn't. Lucien turned to face her. But that doesn't mean he's clean. Men like Ethan Cole don't work in high-level finance without getting their hands dirty. And if he was involved in anything that touched our money laundering operations, we're exposed, Marco said quietly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kaylin sank into one of the leather chairs. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together what this meant. So Celeste went to the FBI to protect herself. Or to hurt us, Lucian said. Either way, she just gave federal investigators a reason to look at Ethan Cole. And when they look at him, they're going to find threads that lead back here. Can you stop them? Kaylin asked. Maybe? Lucian pulled out his phone and started typing. But not without burning bridges I'd rather keep intact. I've got people inside the bureau, but using them for something like this puts them at risk. So what do we do? Before Lucian could answer, one of the other men, young, maybe 30, with nervous energy radiating off him, spoke up. Boss, the facial recognition came through. Marco pulled up a new image. A clean headshot of the man from the parking garage. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, graying at the temples. Special Agent David Reeves, the young man said. 10 years with financial crimes, clean record, by the book, no history of corruption or compromise. Shit, Marco muttered. Lucian's expression didn't change, but Kaylin saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. What's Reeves working on right now? The young man typed rapidly. 3 active cases, securities fraud, crypto money laundering, and, he paused, a task force investigating organized crime's infiltration of legitimate financial institutions. The room went silent again. Kaylin felt sick. He's hunting for connections between the mob and Wall Street. And Celeste just handed him Ethan Cole on a silver platter, Lucian said quietly. A mid-level finance executive with ties to a woman who happens to be married to the head of New York's largest crime family. He doesn't know I'm your wife, Kaylin said desperately. Celeste doesn't know. Nobody knows. Lucian looked at her. Yet. The single word was like a knife to the chest. Marco cleared his throat. We need to move fast. If Reeves starts digging into Cole's financials, he's going to find irregularities. And if he finds irregularities, he's going to start asking questions about who Cole associated with. How long do we have? Lucien asked. Best case? 72 hours before they get warrants. Worst case? They already have them. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Kaylin. I need you to tell me everything you know about Ethan's work. Every conversation, every detail he mentioned about his job. Kaylin tried to think through the panic flooding her brain. He worked for Meridian Capital, investment firm, mid-sized. He managed portfolios for high net worth clients. What kind of clients? I don't know. He never talked specifics. He said it was confidential. Did he ever mention any names? Kaylin shook her head. No, he was paranoid about keeping work and personal life separate. What about his apartment? Did he keep files there, documents? I don't... She stopped, remembered something. Wait, he had a home office, a locked file cabinet. He said it was for tax records, but he never let me near it. Lucian's eyes sharpened. Did Celeste have access to that cabinet? I don't know, maybe. If she knew where he kept the key. Lucian turned to Marco. Send a team to Cole's apartment. I want that cabinet emptied and every document inside it brought here, and I want it done in the next hour. Already gone, boss, Marco said. I sent people as soon as we saw Celeste leave the building. They reported back 10 minutes ago. And? Marco's expression was grim. The cabinet was already empty. Lucian's hands curled into fists. She took everything. Looks like it. How much damage are we talking about? Depends what was in there. Marco pulled up another screen showing financial data. If Cole kept records of his transactions, client names, account numbers, wire transfers, and any of those transactions touched our shell corporations, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Kaylin felt like she was going to be sick. This is my fault. No, Lucian said sharply. This is Celeste Beaumont's fault for thinking she could play games with my family. But I'm the one who called you. I'm the one who brought Ethan into this. You called me because you were hurt and scared. That's not a crime. His voice softened slightly. This is on Celeste, and she's going to pay for it. How? Kaylin demanded. She's already talked to the FBI. The damage is done. The damage is started, Lucian corrected, but it's not done yet. Not if we move fast enough. He turned to Marco. I want a full audit of every financial transaction we've made in the past 3 years. Any connection, however small, to Meridian Capital gets scrubbed. Shell corporations get dissolved. Offshore accounts get moved. I want us invisible by Monday morning. Marco nodded. That's a lot of money to move in 72 hours. Then work faster. Lucian's voice was ice. And get me everything we have on Celeste Beaumont. Bank records, credit cards, phone logs, social media. I want to know every mistake she's ever made and every secret she's ever kept. You're going to blackmail her, Kaylin said quietly. I'm going to give her a choice. Lucian met her eyes. She can walk away quietly and pretend this never happened, or she can keep pushing, and I'll bury her and her father so deep they'll never see daylight again. Her father is Arthur Beaumont. He's not going to let you touch her. Arthur Beaumont, Lucian said coldly, doesn't know his daughter just committed a felony by stealing documents from a private residence and handing them to federal investigators without a warrant. If I go public with that, she loses her credibility. And without credibility, her testimony is worthless. Kaylin stared at him. You're going to destroy a 23-year-old girl. I'm going to protect my family. His voice was absolute. If that means destroying her, then yes, I will. The words should have horrified her. They didn't. Because underneath the fear and the panic and the guilt, there was something else rising in Kaylin's chest. Rage, cold and sharp and focused entirely on Celeste Beaumont, the spoiled little rich girl who'd been fucking Kaylin's boyfriend in her bed, who'd laughed while Ethan threw her into the street, who was now trying to destroy everything Kaylin had left just to save her own reputation. I want to be there, Kaylin said quietly. Lucien looked at her. Where? When you confront her, I want to be there. Kaylin, she humiliated me, Kaylin interrupted. She sat in my bed and laughed while the man I thought I loved called me worthless. And now she's trying to send you to prison because she's too cowardly to face the consequences of her own choices. Her voice was shaking but steady. So yes, I want to be there when you make her pay. Lucien studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. Marco shifted uncomfortably. Boss, is that a good idea? Probably not. Lucian's hand moved to Kaylin's shoulder, squeezing gently. But it's what she wants, so that's what's going to happen. Before anyone could argue, the young man at the computer spoke up again. Boss? We've got another problem. What now? Celeste Beaumont just posted on Instagram. Everyone turned to look at the screen. The young man pulled up Celeste's social media profile. Her latest post was time-stamped 15 minutes ago. It was a photo of her standing in front of a mirror, makeup flawless, hair perfect. The caption read, "Sometimes doing the right thing means standing up to people who think they're above the law. Proud to be using my voice for justice. Hashtag be brave. Hashtag speak truth." The post already had 3,000 likes. Kaylin felt her hands curl into fists. She's bragging about it. She's building a narrative, Lucian said quietly, making herself look like a hero before we can paint her as a criminal. It's smart, Marco admitted. Public sympathy is a hell of a shield. Not smart enough. Lucian pulled out his phone and started typing. Get me everything on her social media for the past year. Every post, every comment, every photo. I want dirt, and I want it now. Already on it, the young man said. Lucien turned to Kaylin. We need to move. If she's going public, that means she's confident. And confidence means she thinks she's got protection. From who? FBI, probably. Or her father. He started toward the door. Either way, we need to get ahead of this before morning. They climbed back up the stairs and emerged into the mansion's main hallway. Dawn was starting to break outside, pale gray light filtering through the windows. Lucien's phone buzzed. He answered it immediately. What? A pause. Then his expression went from cold to murderous in half a second. When? He demanded. Another pause. Get every lawyer we have on this. Now. He hung up and turned to Marco. Ethan Cole just lawyered up. Marco's eyes widened. How? We froze all his accounts. Someone paid for it. Lucian's voice was deadly quiet. Want to guess who? Kaylin's stomach dropped. Celeste? Or her father? Lucien started pacing again, his movements sharp and aggressive. Either way, Cole now has legal representation, which means interrogating him just got a hell of a lot harder. Can we still move him to Alaska? Kaylin asked. Not without kidnapping charges. Lucian stopped pacing and looked at her. The second he lawyered up, he became protected. If we touch him now, we're looking at federal charges. So he just walks away? No. Lucian's voice was ice. He doesn't walk away. He just takes longer to destroy. His phone buzzed again. This time when he answered, his entire body went rigid. Say that again, he said quietly. Kaylin couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she watched Lucien's face go pale. Are you sure? He demanded. A pause. How many? Another pause. Then Lucian said something in Italian that Kaylin didn't understand but recognized as profanity. He hung up and stood perfectly still for 3 long seconds. What happened? Marco asked. Lucien looked up. His eyes were burning. Federal agents just executed search warrants on 4 of our shell corporations. The hallway went silent. They moved faster than we thought, Marco said quietly. They moved before Celeste handed over the documents, Lucien corrected, which means they already had evidence, which means Ethan Cole was cooperating with them before tonight, Kaylin finished. Her voice sounded distant, hollow. Lucian nodded slowly. He's been working with the FBI for weeks, maybe months, and Celeste either knew and helped him, or she's stupider than I thought and accidentally accelerated an investigation that was already underway. Kaylin felt like the ground had opened beneath her feet. Everything he did was calculated. Yes. The affair with Celeste, throwing me out, making me call you. Her breath came faster. He wanted me to bring you into this. He wanted you to retaliate so the FBI could build a case. That's my guess, Lucien said. He used me as bait. Yes. The single word detonated something inside Kaylin's chest. Not fear, not panic. Pure, incandescent fury. Where is he? She demanded. Lucian's eyes met hers. In the basement, under guard. Take me to him. Kaylin, now, she said. Her voice was shaking, but absolute. Take me to him right now, or I swear I will find him myself. For a moment, Lucian just looked at her. Then he nodded once. Marco, he said quietly, get the interrogation room ready. The basement was colder than Kaylin remembered. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered overhead. Ethan was in a windowless room at the end of a long hallway. Two guards stood outside the door, both armed, both watching Kaylin and Lucien approach with carefully neutral expressions. Lucien nodded to them. One of the guards unlocked the door and pulled it open. Inside, Ethan sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor. His wrists were zip-tied to the armrests. His face was bruised. Someone had hit him, recently and hard. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained. He looked up when they entered, and his eyes went wide with terror. "Kaylin," he gasped. "Thank God. Tell them—" "Shut up," she said quietly. Ethan's mouth snapped closed. Kaylin walked slowly across the room until she was standing directly in front of him, close enough to smell the fear sweat soaking through his shirt. "How long?" she asked. "What? How long have you been working with the FBI?" Ethan's face went pale. "I don't know what you're—" She slapped him, hard enough that his head snapped to the side and blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Don't lie to me," she said. Her voice was eerily calm. "You've been cooperating with federal investigators. You've been feeding them information about Lucien's financial operations, and you used me to get access to him." "No," Ethan stammered. "That's not—" "How long?" she repeated. Ethan's eyes darted to Lucien, who stood near the door with his arms crossed and his expression carved from granite. "Help me," Ethan begged. "Please. She's insane." Kaylin grabbed his face and forced him to look at her. "I'm going to ask you one more time. How long?" Ethan's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then, finally, he whispered, 4 months. The world tilted. 4 months, Kaylin repeated numbly. "They came to me," Ethan said desperately. "The FBI. They said they were investigating financial crimes and they knew I worked with some questionable clients. They said if I cooperated, they'd give me immunity." "So you what?" Kaylin's grip tightened. "You found out who I was married to and decided to use me?" "I didn't know at first, I swear." Tears were streaming down Ethan's face now. "I didn't know until 2 months ago. I saw a photo of you at some charity event. You were standing next to him, and I started asking questions." "And when you found out?" "I told my FBI handler. They told me to stay close to you, to see if I could get information." Kaylin's hands were shaking. "The affair with Celeste, was that part of it?" "No." Ethan shook his head frantically. "That was real. That was just you being a piece of shit," she finished. "Kaylin, please. I never wanted to hurt you. You threw me into the street," she said. Her voice was shaking now. "You called me worthless. You humiliated me in front of another woman, and the entire time you were working with federal agents to destroy my husband. I had no choice." "You had every choice," she screamed. "You could have walked away. You could have left me alone, but you didn't because you're a coward and a liar, and you thought you could use me to save yourself." She shoved him hard enough that the chair rocked backward. Ethan was sobbing now, incoherent and terrified. Kaylin turned to Luce. "I want him gone." Lucien nodded slowly. "Alaska?" "No." Her voice was cold, flat, absolute. "Somewhere worse." "There isn't anywhere worse." "Then make somewhere worse." She looked at Ethan one last time, at the pathetic broken man who tried to play games with people so far above his understanding, he never stood a chance. "I want him to disappear completely. I want him to spend the rest of his life regretting every second he ever knew my name." Lucien walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "It's done." Kaylin didn't look back as she left the room, but as the door closed behind her, she heard Ethan's screams echo down the hallway, and she felt nothing at all. Kaylin made it halfway up the basement stairs before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the cold concrete wall, her breath coming in short, violent gasps that had nothing to do with the climb. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against the stone just to make them stop. Behind her, she could still hear Ethan screaming. "Kaylin!" Lucien's voice came from above. He was standing at the top of the stairs, backlit by the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway. "We need to keep moving." She couldn't move, couldn't think past the white-hot rage still burning in her chest. "He used me," she whispered. "For 4 months. Every conversation, every kiss, every time he told me he loved me, all of it was a lie. I know. He was building a case against you, against us, and I gave him everything he needed. Lucien descended the stairs slowly and crouched beside her. His hand found hers, warm and steady against her cold fingers. You didn't give him anything. He tried to use you as a weapon, and it backfired. Did it? Kaylin looked up at him. Federal agents just raided 4 of your companies. They have evidence. They have Celeste's testimony. They have whatever documents she stole from his apartment. Her voice cracked. How is that backfiring? Because they don't have me. Lucien's thumb brushed against her knuckles. And they don't have you. Everything else can be fixed. How? The same way I fix everything. His eyes were cold steel. Money, lawyers, and a very public reminder of what happens to people who cross the Moretti family. Kaylin wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he could make this disappear the way he made everything else disappear. But the fear in her chest wouldn't settle. What about Celeste? She asked. What about her? She's still out there, still talking, still building her narrative. Kaylin's hands curled into fists. We need to stop her before she does more damage. Lucien was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and pulled Kaylin to her feet. Come on, there's someone you need to meet. They climbed the rest of the stairs and emerged into the mansion's main hallway. Dawn had fully broken outside. Pale morning light streamed through the windows, making the marble floors gleam. Marco was waiting near the front door with a woman Kaylin had never seen before. She was in her early 40s, dressed in an expensive navy suit with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and calculating behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Moretti, the woman said with a slight nod. My name is Diana Rothstein. I'm the head of crisis management at Castellano and Partners. Kaylin looked at Lucien. You hired a PR firm. I hired the best crisis management team in New York, he corrected. Diana's going to help us control the narrative before Celeste Beaumont destroys it completely. Diana opened the leather briefcase she was carrying and pulled out a tablet. I've been monitoring the situation since Mr. Moretti called me 3 hours ago. Celeste Beaumont's social media activity has increased dramatically in the past 6 hours. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. She's building sympathy by positioning herself as a whistleblower, standing up to organized crime. Can you stop her? Kaylin asked. Stop her? No. Diana swiped through several screens. But I can muddy the waters enough that her credibility becomes questionable. The key is finding leverage, something in her past that contradicts the innocent victim narrative she's building. What kind of leverage? Diana pulled up a series of photos on the tablet. Celeste at various parties and events over the past 2 years. In several of them, she was visibly intoxicated. In others, she was with men who looked significantly older than her. Celeste Beaumont has a history, Diana said clinically. Drug use, reckless behavior, a DUI that her father's lawyers made disappear. 3 different rehab stints that were kept out of the press. She swiped to another photo. And a very interesting pattern of relationships with men in positions of power. Kaylin stared at the images. You're going to destroy her reputation. I'm going to give the media a more complicated story than the one she's trying to sell. Diana's voice was matter-of-fact. Right now, she's the brave young woman exposing corruption. By this afternoon, she'll be the troubled socialite with credibility problems and a history of manipulation. That's brutal, Kaylin said quietly. That's survival. Diana closed the tablet. The FBI is building a case against your husband using information from a known drug user with a criminal record and a pattern of lying to cover her mistakes. That's reasonable doubt. That's what keeps people out of prison. Lucien's hand found Kaylin's shoulder. I need you to understand something. This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about protection. If we don't destroy Celeste's credibility, she destroys us. Kaylin looked at the tablet, at the photos of a young woman who'd made mistakes and was about to pay for them in the most public way possible. Then she thought about Ethan's face when he'd admitted to using her, about Celeste laughing in her bed, about the FBI agents rifling through Lucien's companies looking for evidence to put him away for the rest of his life. Do it, she said. Diana nodded. I'll need authorization to release certain information to select media contacts. You have it, Lucien interrupted. Whatever you need, just make sure it hits before noon. Consider it done. Diana packed up her briefcase and headed for the door. I'll send updates every 2 hours. After she left, the mansion fell into heavy silence. Marco cleared his throat. Boss, we've got another problem. Lucian's jaw tightened. Of course we do. Arthur Beaumont called. He wants a meeting. When? Now. He's on his way here. Kaylin's breath caught. He's coming here? To the estate? Apparently. Marco checked his phone. ETA 15 minutes. Lucian's expression went cold. How many cars? Just one. His driver and 2 security guards. That's it? That's it. Lucian and Marco exchanged a look that Kaylin couldn't read. He's either incredibly stupid, Lucian said slowly, or he knows something we don't. My money's on the second one, Marco muttered. Mine too. Lucian turned to Kaylin. Go upstairs. Stay in the bedroom. Lock the door. No? She said immediately. Kaylin? No. She stepped closer to him. I'm not hiding, not from Arthur Beaumont, not from anyone. This isn't about hiding, it's about keeping you safe. I'm safest with you. Her voice was steady, absolute. And if Arthur Beaumont is coming here to threaten you, then he's threatening me too, so I'm staying. Lucien looked like he wanted to argue. Then he exhaled slowly and nodded. Fine, but you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understand? I understand. Marco stepped forward. I'll have armed guards positioned throughout the house, just in case. Do it, Lucien checked his watch, and tell everyone to stay out of sight. I don't want Beaumont thinking we're preparing for war. Even if we are? Especially if we are. The next 15 minutes crawled by like hours. Kaylin changed into clothes that felt more like armor. Black pants, a silk blouse, heels that added 3 inches to her height. She pulled her hair back and applied makeup with steady hands, transforming herself from the terrified woman in the basement to something harder, sharper. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. When she came downstairs, Lucien was waiting in the foyer. He'd changed too. Fresh suit, perfectly tailored, dark gray with a black tie. He looked like power incarnate. His eyes tracked over her slowly. You look like a queen. I feel like I'm going into battle. You are. He held out his hand. Stay close to me. She took it. Exactly 14 minutes after Marco's warning, headlights swept across the front windows. A black Mercedes pulled up beneath the portico. The driver stepped out first, then opened the back door. Arthur Beaumont emerged. He was in his late 50s, tall and silver-haired with the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of wealth and power. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His face was composed, but his eyes were burning with barely controlled fury. Lucien opened the front door himself before Beaumont could knock. Arthur, he said evenly, this is unexpected. Is it? Beaumont's voice was clipped, cold. My daughter is all over social media claiming she exposed criminal activity. Federal agents raided multiple properties connected to your organization. And now I'm getting calls from my lawyers warning me that my family is about to be dragged through a very public scandal. He stepped closer. So no, Moretti. This isn't unexpected. This is necessary. Lucien stepped aside. Come in. Beaumont entered the mansion like he owned it, his eyes sweeping over the marble floors and crystal chandeliers with barely concealed disdain. His gaze landed on Kaylin, and something flickered across his expression. And you are? He asked. Kaylin Moretti, Lucien said before she could answer. My wife. Beaumont's eyes widened slightly. Then his expression hardened. So the rumors are true. What rumors? Kaylin asked. That Lucien Moretti married some nobody from Brooklyn and kept her hidden for 2 years. His voice was acid. I didn't believe it. Thought it was just another story people told to make you seem more dangerous than you actually are. He looked at Lucien. But here she is. The great secret. Careful, Arthur, Lucien said quietly. Or what? Beaumont's voice rose. You'll threaten me the way you threatened my daughter? You'll send your thugs to intimidate her the way you intimidated that pathetic finance executive she was sleeping with? Your daughter, Lucien said, his voice dropping to something deadly, stole documents from a private residence and handed them to federal investigators. That's a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. So before you start making accusations, you might want to consider that Celeste is the one who broke the law. She was protecting herself. She was covering her own ass after she got caught fucking a man who was using her to build a case against my family. Lucian stepped forward. Don't pretend this is about justice, Arthur. This is about your daughter being too stupid to realize she was being played. Beaumont's face flushed red. How dare you? How dare I what? Lucian's voice was ice. Tell you the truth? Your precious daughter spent months sleeping with a federal informant. She gave him access to information. She probably told him things about your business dealings too, Arthur. Things the FBI would be very interested to know. The color drained from Beaumont's face. Oh, Lucian said softly. You didn't think about that, did you? You were so focused on protecting Celeste's reputation that you forgot to ask what she might have said to Ethan Cole during all those late-night conversations. She wouldn't. She would. Lucian pulled out his phone and pulled up a series of text messages. These are from Cole's phone. Our people recovered them before the FBI could. Want to see what your daughter was texting him about your offshore accounts? Beaumont's jaw clenched. You're bluffing. Read them yourself. Lucien held out the phone. Beaumont stared at the screen. His face went from red to white in seconds. She didn't know what she was saying, he whispered. Doesn't matter. Lucien pocketed the phone. What matters is that she said it. And now the FBI has enough to start asking questions about your finances, too. Beaumont sank into one of the leather chairs in the foyer like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. This is a disaster. It doesn't have to be. Lucian's voice was calmer now, controlled. We can fix this. Both of us. But it requires cooperation. Beaumont looked up. What kind of cooperation? The kind where your daughter stops talking to the press, stops posting on social media and disappears for a while. Maybe a European vacation, maybe rehab. I don't care, as long as she's out of the spotlight. And in exchange? In exchange, I make sure these text messages never see the light of day. I make sure the FBI's investigation into Ethan Cole stays focused on him and doesn't expand to include your daughter's involvement. Lucian paused. And I forget that you called me arrogant in my own home. Beaumont's hands were shaking. How do I know you won't use this against me later? You don't. Lucien's voice was brutal in its honesty. But you don't have any other choice. Because if you don't agree, I release everything. The text messages, the offshore accounts, every dirty secret Celeste accidentally spilled to a federal informant, and then we both go down. The only question is who burns faster. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Finally, Beaumont said very quietly, What do you want me to do? Call your daughter. Tell her to delete every social media post from the past 24 hours. Tell her to refuse any media requests. Tell her to get on a plane to Europe tonight and stay there until I say otherwise. She won't listen to me. Make her listen. Lucian's voice was absolute. Because if she doesn't, I'll make sure she spends the next decade in federal prison for obstruction of justice, theft, and conspiracy, and you'll be right there with her. Beaumont pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He dialed, waited. Celeste, he said when she answered. His voice was strained. We need to talk. Now. Kaylin couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she watched Beaumont's face cycle through anger, fear, and resignation. I don't care what you think you're doing, he said finally. You're going to delete every post. You're going to stop talking to reporters. And you're going to get on a plane to Paris tonight. Celeste's voice rose, audible even through the phone. Because if you don't, Beaumont interrupted, you're going to prison. And so am I. Is that clear enough for you? More shouting. Then Beaumont hung up and looked at Lucien. It's done. Good. Lucien's expression didn't change. Now get out of my house. Beaumont stood slowly, like he'd aged 10 years in the past 20 minutes. He walked to the door, then stopped and turned back. This isn't over, Moretti, he said quietly. Yes, Lucien replied. It is. Beaumont left without another word. The moment the door closed, Kaylin's legs nearly gave out again. Lucien caught her, his arm wrapping around her waist. Breathe, he said quietly. I can't. Her voice was shaking. I can't believe that just happened. Believe it. He guided her to the sitting room and lowered her onto the couch. Arthur Beaumont just became an ally. Not because he wants to be, but because he doesn't have a choice. Marco appeared in his doorway. The daughter's social media is already going dark. Posts are being deleted as we speak. What about the FBI? Kaylin asked. They're still investigating, Marco said. But without Celeste's testimony and with her credibility destroyed, their case just got a lot weaker. What about Ethan? Kaylin's voice was hollow. He's still cooperating with them. Not for long. Lucien pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. Move the package tonight. I want him on a boat by midnight. A pause. I don't care if it's rough. Make it as rough as you need to. Just make sure he disappears. He hung up and looked at Kaylin. Ethan Cole will be on a commercial fishing vessel bound for the Bering Sea in 8 hours. By the time the FBI realizes he's gone, he'll be 3,000 miles from New York with no way to contact anyone. They'll come looking for him, Kaylin said. Let them look. Lucien sat beside her. The boat's registered in Panama. The crew doesn't speak English, and the captain owes me more favors than he can count. Ethan will spend the next 5 years working 18-hour days in freezing water, and when he's finally allowed to come back, he'll be so broken that no federal agent will ever want to put him on a witness stand. Kaylin should have felt satisfaction, should have felt vindicated. Instead, she just felt empty. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we wait. Lucien's hand found hers. The FBI will keep investigating, but without witnesses and with their evidence compromised, they'll eventually close the case. Arthur Beaumont will keep his mouth shut because he knows I have enough dirt to destroy him. And Celeste will spend the next year in Europe trying to rebuild a reputation that doesn't exist anymore. And us? Lucien looked at her. Really looked at her. That's up to you. What do you mean? I mean you have a choice. His thumb brushed against her knuckles. You can stay here. Rebuild your life with me. Accept that this is who you are and who you've always been. Or you can walk away. I'll protect you either way, but I need to know what you want. Kaylin stared at their joined hands, at the contrast between her pale skin and his darker olive tone, at the way his fingers curled around hers like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. I don't know what I want, she whispered. Then figure it out. His voice was gentle but firm. Because I can't keep living in this limbo. I can't keep waiting for you to decide if I'm worth the risk. Before Kaylin could respond, Marco's phone buzzed. He answered it, his expression shifting from neutral to alarmed in seconds. Boss, he said urgently, we've got a problem. Lucien stood immediately. What kind of problem? Federal agents just arrived at the front gate. They have a warrant. Kaylin's blood turned to ice. A warrant for what? Marco's face was grim. For both of you. The room exploded into motion. Lucien was already moving toward the hallway, barking orders into his phone. Marco was calling lawyers and security teams. Kaylin stood frozen in the middle of the sitting room, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. This was it. The moment everything collapsed. Lucien appeared beside her, his hands framing her face. Listen to me very carefully. You're going to go upstairs, you're going to pack a bag with essentials, and you're going to wait in the bedroom until I come get you. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to the federal agents. I'm going to stall them while our lawyers get here. And then I'm going to make sure this warrant disappears. His eyes bored into hers. But I need you safe. Understand? Lucien, do you understand? His voice cracked slightly. She nodded. He kissed her. Hard and desperate and terrified. Then he pulled away and was gone, striding toward the front of the mansion like a man walking into battle. Kaylin climbed the stairs on shaking legs. She could hear voices echoing from the foyer, official, authoritative, demanding entry. She made it to the bedroom and locked the door. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely grip the handle of the suitcase she pulled from the closet. This was real. The FBI was here. They had a warrant, and no amount of money or power or threats was going to stop what was coming next. Kaylin sank onto the edge of the bed and pressed her hands to her face. Downstairs, she heard the front door open. Heard Lucien's voice, calm and measured, asking to see the warrant. Heard the federal agent respond with words she couldn't make out, but understood perfectly. And then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Kaylin Moretti, you're under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice and accessory to racketeering. The bedroom door shattered inward. 3 federal agents poured into the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands Kaylin's brain couldn't process. She raised her hands. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just watched as they pulled her to her feet, turned her around, and locked cold metal handcuffs around her wrists. And as they dragged her out of the bedroom, down the stairs, past Lucien, who was being restrained by 4 agents while he roared her name, Kaylin finally understood the truth. She'd been playing a game she could never win, and now it was time to pay the price. The federal holding facility in Lower Manhattan smelled like disinfectant and fear. Kaylin sat in a windowless interrogation room with her hands cuffed to a metal table, staring at the two-way mirror on the opposite wall and wondering who was watching. She'd been here for 6 hours, maybe 7. They'd taken her phone, her jewelry, her shoes, strip-searched her, fingerprinted her, photographed her from every angle like she was evidence instead of a person. Nobody had told her what the charges were. Nobody had read her rights. Nobody had offered her water or food or a lawyer. They were trying to break her before the real interrogation even started. It was working. The door opened. A man walked in, mid-40s, graying at the temples, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a rumpled suit and carried a thick manila folder. Special Agent David Reeves. Kaylin recognized him from the surveillance photos Marco had shown her, the FBI agent Celeste had met with in the parking garage, the man leading the investigation into Lucien's empire. He sat down across from her without speaking, just opened the folder and spread out a series of photographs on the table. Kaylin, in Brooklyn, walking to the gallery, sitting alone in a coffee shop, unlocking the door to Ethan's apartment. Her breath caught. "You've been busy," Reeves said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. 18 months living under a fake name, working a dead-end job, playing house with a man who had no idea who you really were. He tapped one of the photos. Or did he? Kaylin said nothing. See, that's the question we keep coming back to. Reeves leaned forward. Did Ethan Cole know you were Kaylin Moretti when he started dating you? Or did he find out later and decide to use that information? I want a lawyer, Kaylin said quietly. You'll get one, eventually. Reeves pulled out another photo. This one showed Lucien's Maybach pulling up outside Ethan's building. But first, I want you to understand something. We've been investigating your husband for 3 years. 3 years of surveillance and wiretaps and financial audits. And we've gotten close before. But every time we get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories. Judges throw out warrants. He slid the photo closer to her. Until Ethan Cole. Reeves's voice was harder now. A low-level finance executive who happened to be sleeping with the wife of New York's most powerful crime boss. That's the kind of coincidence that gets federal investigators very interested. Kaylin's hands were shaking beneath the table. I didn't know he was working with you. But you suspected something was wrong. No. Then why did you call your husband the night Ethan threw you out? Reeves pulled out another photo. The satellite phone. Black and compact and unmistakably military grade. This phone was recovered from your purse. It's encrypted, untraceable. The kind of phone criminals use when they don't want anyone listening. I want a lawyer, Kaylin repeated. You called Lucien Moretti, Reeves continued like she hadn't spoken. And 9 minutes later, his entire organization descended on Bedford Avenue like an invading army. Armed men, armored vehicles. They shut down an entire city block. He leaned back in his chair. That's not how innocent people respond to a breakup, Mrs. Moretti. That's how organized crime responds to a threat. Kaylin stared at the table. Her throat was so tight she could barely breathe. Here's what I think happened, Reeves said quietly. I think Ethan Cole found out who you were. I think he told us. And I think we told him to stay close and gather evidence. But somewhere along the way, Ethan got greedy. He thought he could play both sides, keep you as his girlfriend while feeding us information, maybe even blackmail your husband. He pulled out one final photo. Ethan being dragged out of his apartment by Dante and 2 other men. His face was twisted in terror. His feet barely touched the ground. But he underestimated Lucien Moretti, Reeves finished. Just like you did. Kaylin's head snapped up. What? You thought you could run away. Thought you could build a normal life and pretend the past didn't exist. Reeves's eyes were cold. But you can't outrun what you are. And what you are, Mrs. Moretti, is a criminal. You married into a crime family. You benefited from illegal activity. You helped your husband evade justice for 2 years by disappearing and making us think he'd lost control of his organization. That's not true, isn't it? Reeves stood and started pacing. You vanished 18 months ago. No warning, no explanation. Lucien Moretti's behavior changed immediately. He became more cautious, more careful, started routing his operations through layers of shell corporations we couldn't penetrate. And the entire time, you were out there playing bait, drawing our attention away from him. Kellen's vision blurred. I didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing. Reeves stopped pacing and leaned across the table. You're not some innocent victim who got caught up in a bad situation. You're an active participant, and that makes you just as guilty as your husband. The words hit like a physical blow. Because part of her, the part that had walked away from Ethan's interrogation without looking back, the part that had told Lucien to make him disappear, knew Reeves was right. She wasn't innocent anymore. Maybe she never had been. Where's Ethan Cole? And Reeves asked. Kalen said nothing. We know your husband's people took him. We know he's not in New York anymore. We know... Reeves paused. We know he's probably already dead. No. The word came out before Kalen could stop it. Reeves's eyes sharpened. No? He's not dead. Kalen's voice was hollow. He's on a fishing boat, somewhere in Alaska. How do you know that? Because I asked Lucien not to kill him. She looked up at Reeves. I asked him to make Ethan disappear, to make him suffer, but not to kill him. Reeves was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down slowly. Why? Because death is easy. Kalen's hands curled into fists beneath the table. And Ethan Cole deserves something harder. The interrogation room fell silent. Reeves stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as a victim, not as a pawn, as something else entirely. You really are one of them, he said quietly. Yes, Kalen whispered. I am. The door opened. A woman in a federal prosecutor's blazer walked in and handed Reeves a piece of paper. He read it, his expression shifting from triumph to confusion to anger in rapid succession. What? He demanded. Judge threw out the warrant, the woman said. Insufficient evidence. The arrest is invalid. Reeves stood so fast his chair fell backward. That's impossible. We had... Apparently, the documents Celeste Beaumont provided were obtained illegally, without a warrant, without permission. The entire chain of evidence is compromised. The woman looked at Kalen. You're free to go, Mrs. Moretti. Kalen couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what she was hearing. This is bullshit, Reeves snarled. Moretti got to the judge. He paid someone off. Doesn't matter. The woman's voice was flat. The arrest is invalid. We have to release her. She just admitted to being an accessory to kidnapping. Without a lawyer present. Without being read her rights. It's inadmissible. The woman gestured to the door. Let her go before this gets worse. Reeves looked like he wanted to put his fist through the wall, but he pulled out a key and unlocked Kalen's handcuffs with movement so violent she flinched. This isn't over, he said quietly. We'll find another way to get you. Both of you. Kalen rubbed her wrists where the metal had cut into her skin. You can try. She walked out of the interrogation room on shaking legs. A federal agent escorted her through a maze of hallways to the front entrance where her belongings were returned. Phone, jewelry, shoes. The moment she stepped outside, she saw him. Lucien was leaning against the Maybach parked at the curb, still wearing the same suit from this morning. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned when he saw her. Kalen crossed the sidewalk. Her legs felt unsteady. Her hands were still shaking. Lucien pushed off the car and caught her before she could fall, his arms wrapped around her so tightly she couldn't breathe. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. His voice was rough, broken. I'm so sorry. Kalen pressed her face against his chest and finally let herself cry. They stood there for a long time. Long enough that people started staring. Long enough that Marco had to circle the block twice because they couldn't move. Finally, Lucien pulled back just enough to look at her face. His thumb brushed away her tears. Let's go home, he said quietly. She nodded. They drove in silence back to the Bronx. Kalen watched the city blur past the tinted windows and tried to remember what normal felt like. Tried to remember the version of herself who'd believed she could escape this life. That woman was gone. Burned away by handcuffs and interrogation rooms and federal agents who saw her exactly as she was. A criminal. A queen. A monster. When they reached the estate, Teresa was waiting at the door with a glass of water and a concerned expression that softened when she saw Kaylin. "Your room is ready, Mrs. Moretti," she said gently. Kaylin took the water with trembling hands. "Thank you." Upstairs, the bedroom had been cleaned and reset. No broken door, no signs of the violence that had torn through here just hours ago. It looked exactly the way it had when Kaylin first arrived, pristine and untouched and waiting. She sank onto the edge of the bed and stared at nothing. Lucien sat beside her, not touching, just present. "How did you do it?" Kaylin asked quietly. "How did you get the warrant thrown out?" "I didn't." His voice was tired. "Our lawyers did. They found a procedural error in how the FBI obtained evidence from Celeste Beaumont. Once that was invalidated, the entire case collapsed. So I'm free. For now. And Ethan? On a boat, 300 miles off the coast of Alaska. He'll stay there for the next 5 years unless we decide otherwise." Kaylin closed her eyes. "And Celeste?" "On a plane to Paris. Her father made sure of it." Lucien was quiet for a moment. Arthur Beaumont also agreed to testify against the FBI if they try to pursue this case further. Turns out he's not happy about federal agents using his daughter as an informant without his knowledge. So it's over. The immediate threat is over. Lucian's hand found hers. "But this war isn't finished, Kaylin. Reeves will keep investigating. He'll find new evidence, new witnesses, and eventually he'll come for us again. Then what do? We get smarter, we cover our tracks better, we make sure nobody can ever use you against me again." His grip tightened. "And we decide what kind of life we want to live." Kaylin turned to look at him. "What does that mean?" "It means I need to know if you're staying." His voice was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. "I need to know if you can handle this. If you can handle me, because I can't keep living in uncertainty. I can't keep waiting for you to run again." "I'm not running." "How do I know that?" "Because I'm still here." Kaylin's eyes met his. "After everything that happened today, the arrest, the interrogation, the federal agents telling me I'm a criminal, I'm still here. I'm still choosing you." Something cracked in Lucian's expression. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I've loved you since the day I met you. And I'll keep loving you even if it destroys me." Kaylin's throat tightened. "I love you too. Even though I'm a monster? Especially because you're a monster." She pulled back to look at him. "Because you're my monster, and I'm yours." Lucian kissed her, slow and desperate and tasting like salt from both their tears. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting outside. Golden light streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of amber and crimson. "What happens now?" Kaylin asked. "Now we rebuild." Lucien stood and held out his hand. "We fix what's broken, we strengthen what's weak, and we make sure nobody can ever hurt us like this again." "How?" "Together." His eyes were steady, absolute, the way it was always supposed to be. Kaylin took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. It's 3 months later, winter settled over New York like a blanket of ice and silence. Kaylin stood at the window of Lucien's penthouse office overlooking Manhattan and watched snow fall across the city. Behind her, she could hear Marco and Dante discussing security protocols for the new year. Lucien was on the phone with their lawyers, finalizing the acquisition of a media company that would help control future narratives. Everything had changed. The FBI's investigation had stalled after Arthur Beaumont withdrew his cooperation, and Celeste's credibility imploded under the weight of Diana Rothstein's carefully orchestrated media campaign. Special Agent Reeves had been reassigned to a different case. The warrants had been invalidated. The evidence had been thrown out. On paper, Lucien and Kaylin were clean, but everyone knew the truth. The Moretti Empire had survived, again, and Kaylin was no longer the invisible wife hiding in Brooklyn. She stood beside Lucien at charity galas and business meetings. She signed documents and made decisions and terrified people with a single cold look. She'd become exactly what she'd tried to escape. A queen. "Hey!" Lucien's voice came from behind her. "You okay?" Kaylin turned. He was watching her with that concerned expression he wore whenever he thought she might be having second thoughts. "I'm fine," she said. "You sure?" You've been staring out that window for 20 minutes. Just thinking. About what? She looked back at the snow-covered city. About Ethan. Lucian was quiet for a moment, then he moved to stand beside her. He's still alive, if that's what you're worried about. Our people check in every month. He's working, eating, surviving. Is he suffering? Yes. Good. The word came out flat, empty. Lucian studied her face. You don't sound convinced. I don't know what I sound like anymore. Kaylin wrapped her arms around herself. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the person staring back. That's normal. Is it? Because I used to be someone who cared about things like justice and forgiveness, and now I'm someone who sends people to fishing boats in Alaska and feels nothing. You feel something, Lucian said quietly. You just don't want to admit what it is. And what is it? Relief. His hand moved to her shoulder. Relief that the person who hurt you is paying for it. Relief that you're finally strong enough to stop pretending you're weak. Kaylin closed her eyes. I don't want to be this person. Yes, you do. Lucian turned her to face him. You just wish you didn't, but that's not the same thing. He was right. She hated that he was right. What happened to Celeste? Kaylin asked, changing the subject. Still in Paris. Last I heard, she's enrolled in some art history program and trying to reinvent herself as a serious academic. Lucien's mouth curved slightly. Apparently, being exposed as a drug-using liar with credibility problems makes it hard to maintain a social media presence. Do you think she'll ever come back? Maybe. But not for a long time. And by then, nobody will remember or care. He paused. Arthur Beaumont made sure of that. He spent the past 3 months systematically erasing every trace of Celeste's involvement in this mess. New narrative, new identity, new life. Sounds familiar? Kaylin murmured. The difference is that Celeste's running from shame. You ran from fear, and now you're done running entirely. Kaylin looked up at him. How do you know I won't run again? Because you're not afraid anymore. Lucien's hand cupped her face. You're angry. You're powerful. You're everything you tried to pretend you weren't, and that's not something you run from. That's something you embrace. Even if it makes me a monster? Especially if it makes you a monster. His thumb brushed against her cheekbone. Because monsters survive, Kaylin. Weak people don't. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she could still be good, still be normal. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, underneath all the guilt and the fear and the self-loathing, there was a truth she couldn't deny. She liked who she'd become, liked the way people looked at her with fear and respect, liked the power that came from standing beside Lucien instead of hiding behind him, liked knowing that nobody would ever throw her into the street again. I'm not a good person, she whispered. No, Lucian agreed, you're not, but you're mine, and that's all that matters. He kissed her, and Kaylin kissed him back with everything she had. 6 months after Ethan Cole disappeared into the frozen waters of Alaska, Kaylin stood in the same Brooklyn gallery where she'd once worked minimum wage and pretended to be nobody. The owner had retired, the building had been sold, and the new owner, a shell corporation controlled by the Moretti Empire, had hired Kaylin as the director. She walked through the empty space, her heels clicking against hardwood floors, and tried to remember what it felt like to be the woman who'd stood here selling overpriced paintings to tourists. That woman was gone. Burned away by federal interrogations and handcuffs and the slow, terrible realization that some people weren't meant to be saved. They were meant to rule. Kaylin stopped in front of the window overlooking Bedford Avenue. Snow was falling again. The street looked exactly the same as it had the night Ethan threw her out. Same broken awning, same crumbling buildings, same sense of barely controlled chaos. But everything was different now. Because Kaylin wasn't the powerless woman standing in the rain anymore. She was the storm. Behind her, the gallery door opened. Footsteps crossed the floor. You ready? Lucien asked. Kaylin turned. He was wearing a dark overcoat and holding 2 cups of coffee from the shop across the street. The same shop where she used to buy cheap drip coffee because she couldn't afford anything else. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. They walked out together into the snow. The Maybach was parked at the curb with Marco behind the wheel. Kaylin slid into the back seat and Lucien followed. Where to, boss? Marco asked. Home, Lucien said. The car pulled away from Bedford Avenue, away from the apartment where Kaylin's old life had ended, away from the gallery where she'd pretended to be someone she wasn't, toward the estate in the Bronx, toward the marble halls and crystal chandeliers and armed guards who bowed their heads when she passed, toward the only life she'd ever really belonged to. Kaylin rested her head against Lucien's shoulder and closed her eyes. Outside, the city moved on. Millions of people living their ordinary lives, working their ordinary jobs, loving and fighting and surviving in the only ways they knew how. None of them knew that somewhere high above the skyline, in a penthouse that overlooked the entire city like a throne room, the true rulers of New York sat watching, king and queen, monster and monster, together. And somewhere in the freezing waters off the coast of Alaska, on a commercial fishing vessel registered in a country that didn't ask questions, Ethan Cole pulled nets filled with dying fish from the ocean and finally understood a lesson that came far too late. Some women don't need revenge. They are revenge. And mercy is just another word for weakness. Kaylin opened her eyes as the Maybach crossed into the Bronx. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of blood and gold. Lucien's hand found hers, warm and steady and permanent. No regrets? He asked quietly. She thought about Ethan screaming in the basement, about Celeste's social media empire crumbling, about federal agents who'd tried to break her and failed, about the woman she used to be and the woman she'd become. No, Kaylin said, no regrets. Because regret was for people who believed they'd made the wrong choice. And Kaylin Moretti had made the only choice that ever mattered. She'd chosen to survive. And in a world as brutal and unforgiving as theirs, survival wasn't about being good. It was about being stronger than everyone who wanted to destroy you. The Maybach passed through the iron gates of the estate. Guards nodded respectfully as they drove past. The mansion rose ahead of them, massive and imposing against the darkening sky. Kaylin squeezed Lucien's hand. He squeezed back. And as night fell over New York City, swallowing millions of ordinary lives in darkness, two monsters sat in the back of an armored car and smiled. Because they'd won. Not because they were righteous, not because they were innocent, but because they were willing to do what nobody else would. They were willing to become the thing everyone feared. And in the end, fear was the only currency that mattered. The car stopped beneath the covered portico. Marco opened the door. Lucien stepped out first and extended his hand. Kaylin took it. And together they walked into the mansion that had always been waiting for her. Into the life she'd tried to escape and finally learned to embrace. Into the future they would build together, brick by brutal brick, until nothing and nobody could ever tear it down. Home.